Hello friends, I am glad to see you again. Today I will tell you about a homeowners association that is demanding that I give them my second home. Friends, I never expected to see two sheriff's cruisers crawling up my private gravel drive, lights spinning like a county fair ride, all because the local homeowners association decided I should donate my spare house to become their shed. One of the deputies stepped out and tipped his hat in that "we've been dragged into nonsense again" kind of way. The other tapped his tablet, already exhausted. Behind them, a bright yellow utility truck idled, loaded with rakes and wheelbarrows. I could see Wanda, HOA president, self-appointed Duchess of the cul-de-sac, waving papers like a baton while mouthing off to whoever was still on the 911 line. A week earlier, I'd been content restoring a century-old ranch property my grandmother left me. The land sprawls across the valley floor and halfway up the surrounding ridges. More acreage than postcard, less than national park, but still big enough that folks forget someone actually owns it. The second house they wanted is a craftsman guest lodge perched on a rise overlooking a trout stream. I use it mostly for visiting family and the occasional writing retreat. Evidently, Wanda thought empty guest rooms equal-sign public storage opportunity. The HOA covers 21 houses clustered at the far northern edge of my land, places that sprouted during a mid-2000s boom, when a developer convinced buyers they were purchasing exclusive mountain living. The catch: the developer leased the lots from my family on a renewable 99-year ground lease. Monthly payments land in my mailbox like clockwork. The HOA members live there unquestioningly, believing the developer's marketing that the community controlled everything from creek to crest. No one read the fine print that the valley floor, the ridgelines, the ponds, and yes, my guest lodge, remain under one deed, mine. That detail apparently irritated Wanda once she was elected HOA president. First came polite letters asking if the association could use my gravel road to shortcut landscaping trucks. I declined. Liability and all that. Next came thicker envelopes threatening to sue for easement rights they imagined into existence. My attorney, Kenyon, mailed back a single-sentence reply: no. Then came the 911 call. According to the deputy, Wanda reported an ongoing property emergency, claiming that the association's equipment was homeless and that I was endangering community welfare by refusing shelter. She insisted I relinquish the lodge immediately so their zero-turn mower wouldn't freeze to death this winter. The dispatcher, obliged to log any emergency request, sent deputies to mediate. I greeted them on the porch with fresh lemonade because even in absurdity, hospitality matters. Deputy Carter cleared his throat. "Sir, Miss Wanda alleges you've agreed to gift the structure behind us." He knew it wasn't true. The county GIS database shows my name on every parcel like a neon sign. Still, protocol required the question. I invited them inside, produced the original 1924 deed, the updated meets and bounds survey, and the ground lease contract, all notarized and stamped. Carter scrolled, nodded, and finally said the words I'd been waiting to hear: "Ma'am, this house is not yours. Also, using 911 for a civil dispute is illegal." Wanda's jaw wagged like a ventriloquist dummy that lost its puppet. "But he's just one person. He can't possibly need two houses," she protested, voice echoing over the porch rail. Her posse of HOA board members, Chuck and Marlene, shuffled their feet but avoided eye contact. I almost felt bad for them. Almost. They'd built their neighborhood identity on power-walking governance, mailbox color codes, holiday light schedules, mandatory pet DNA registration for poop policing. Yet none of their bylaws reached beyond their postage stamp lawns. Seeing that truth splashed in Deputy Blue authority unraveled their illusion. When Carter told them to leave or face citations for trespass, Wanda pivoted to threats. "Fine, we'll invoke eminent domain," she shrieked, mispronouncing eminent, so it came out imminent. She probably saw the term on a daytime court show and assumed any committee of neighbors could wield it like a magic wand. The deputies exchanged glances that screamed, "Not our circus, not our monkeys," before escorting her back to the road. I thought that would end the spectacle. It didn't. 2 days later, a certified letter arrived, unsigned, declaring that the HOA board had voted unanimously to requisition my guest lodge under something they labeled Community Hardship Clause 4B. I skimmed their own bylaws. Nothing remotely like a 4B existed, but they'd attached a schedule. Movers would arrive Friday at noon to begin the transition. They even included a parking diagram for dump trucks. That's when I decided if they wanted a lesson in property law, I'd make it unforgettable. Step 1. Documentation. I installed trail cams along every approach to the lodge, each sending live feeds to cloud storage. Step 2. Paper trail. Kenyon fired off cease and desist notices citing trespass, harassment, and misuse of emergency services. Step 3. Stakes. Literal ones. I pounded bright orange survey markers outlining the lodge parcel and added aluminum signs. Private property. Trespassers will be recorded and prosecuted. Nothing aggressive, just factual. Friday arrived with storm clouds and misplaced confidence. At 11:58 a.m., a rented flatbed rattled up the drive, driven by teenagers who'd clearly been promised beer and $20. Behind them trundled Wanda's husband, Phil, in the community golf cart, towing a trailer piled with ladders. I met them halfway, flanked by my buddy Sawyer, who happened to be an off-duty county fire marshal. He crossed arms the size of small boulders and let me do the talking. I pointed to the signs. "Turn around, final warning." Phil gulped. Wanda, following in her SUV, hit the horn twice as though commanding infantry. She hopped out, brandishing a clipboard. "You can't stop us. This is an authorized operation." Sawyer flashed his badge. "Ma'am, I'm witnessing potential criminal trespass. Leave now." Wanda grabbed her phone, presumably to dial 911 again, but paused when Sawyer added, "Dispatch already briefed on false reports. Next call triggers charges." The color drained from her face. She ordered the convoy to retreat, tires spitting gravel. They were gone, temporarily. The valley, though, was awake. Neighbors trooped out to watch the drama, whispering amongst themselves. Some looked sympathetic. Others annoyed that their HOA dues funded this fiasco when the playground swings still squeaked with rust. That evening, I heard rumblings about a special meeting Wanda scheduled at the community gazebo. Apparently, she intended to double down. New bylaw amendments, emergency assessments to hire an attorney, and, my favorite, an agenda item titled Strategies for Compliance Acquisition. They planned to strong-arm me or bleed me with legal costs. Little did they know I'd been preparing a chess move 2 years in the making. A conservation easement over the entire valley. My grandmother's wish was to keep the land undeveloped beyond the existing houses. The easement paperwork sat with the State Land Trust, awaiting my signature. Once filed, it would lock the property into permanent stewardship. No new roads, no commercial structures, and most importantly, no HOA tool depot. The association's own covenants respected all county and state encumbrances. Once the easement recorded, their claim evaporated like morning fog. I called an old college friend, Elora, now a land use attorney fluent in government acronyms. She agreed to fast-track the easement filing. "Get me the final survey and I'll walk it through the courthouse Monday," she promised. Saturday dawned brittle and bright. I saddled my horse, Jasper, and rode the fence line, partly to clear my head, partly to ensure no one had tampered with the markers. Mid-ride, I spotted new laminated posters zip-tied to community signposts. "Urgent HOA vote tonight. Save our equipment. Save our community." Beneath the headline was a photo of my guest lodge, angle skewed to look abandoned. Nice try. That afternoon, a minivan rolled up my driveway. Out stepped a silver-haired woman I recognized from neighborhood walks. Viola, retired librarian and voice of reason at HOA meetings. She carried a bundt cake and an apologetic smile. "Could we talk?" she asked. Over coffee, she revealed the board's real motivation. They'd blown half the maintenance budget on new playground turf that failed inspection. The county gave them 60 days to fix drainage or face daily fines. They needed somewhere to store gravel, tools, and drainage pipe cheaply. Wanda convinced the board that requisitioning the lodge would solve everything. Zero rent, instant storage, plus the optics of community expansion. Viola slid a folder across the table, copies of internal emails she'd quietly collected. One thread showed Wanda suggesting they could pressure me by making his life difficult. Another detailed unauthorized spending on consulting fees to an out-of-state law firm Wanda's cousin ran. It smelled like self-dealing. I thanked Viola and promised discretion. She insisted on walking back, leaving the cake behind. Jasper and I finished our circuit while I plotted Phase 2. Expose corruption, rally sane residents, and let the board implode under its own arrogance. After sunset, the gazebo meeting commenced. I chose not to attend but listened from a distance on a portable scanner. Public meetings must allow passive observers. Wanda called the session to order, voice dripping righteousness. She presented a motion to levy a community integrity assessment of $2,000 per household to battle my obstruction. Gasps erupted. Someone asked for legal citations. Wanda dodged, promising details forthcoming. Then Viola spoke. Her normally gentle tone cut like a snow saw. She read excerpts from the emails, emphasized the playground fiasco, the cousins' invoices, and the lies told to deputies. Murmurs swelled into shouts. Chuck tried to gavel order, but the crowd ignored him. A motion to table Wanda's assessment passed instantly. A second motion, vote of no confidence, rose from the back. Voices cracked eye after eye until even Chuck conceded unanimous consent. Wanda's presidency evaporated under the gazebo lights. I almost felt the valley breathe easier, but fireworks were still ahead. The ex-board might resist stepping down, might continue poking the hornet nest. That's why Elora's easement filing had to hit the clerk's counter first thing Monday. Until then, the lodge remained a shiny target. I stayed up past midnight drafting a community letter outlining the truth, the property boundaries, the easement intent, and an open invitation for residents to enjoy marked hiking trails once the trust formalized access rules. I printed a stack on heavy cream stationery ready for porch deliveries at dawn. As I sealed the last envelope, my phone buzzed. Sawyer again. "Thought you should know," he said. "Dispatch flagged another 911 from your HOA. They claim you're operating an illegal pawn shop out of the lodge." He actually laughed mid-sentence. "We're not rolling units, but be aware, you've got a serial false reporter." I thanked him, hung up, and looked out the window toward the distant porch light of the lodge. Somewhere beyond the pines, Wanda nursed bruised pride and, apparently, new fantasies. I locked the door, set the alarm, and told myself one more weekend of vigilance would tip the scales. By dawn, the Sunday air smelled of wet cedar and simmering fallout. I loaded the envelopes into a canvas satchel, biked the half-mile to the cul-de-sac, and did porch drops while folks still nursed coffee. A few early birds waved awkwardly. Most pretended to adjust sprinklers. I didn't linger. When the last letter slid through Viola's mail slot, I coasted home, satisfied that every household now understood both their legal boundaries and Wanda's creative accounting. Mid-morning brought the next tremor. Chuck, apparently auditioning for interim president, emailed a cease communication directive, telling residents to discard my letter because it contained unverified claims. He cited no statute, just bold fonts. Counter emails followed within minutes. Someone asked why the playground invoice he'd signed listed drainage pipe at triple retail price. Someone else attached a screenshot of Wanda's cousin bragging on social media about easy HOA money. The thread turned into a digital town square, complete with pitchfork emojis. I stayed silent. Better to let the truth mulch on its own. Late afternoon, Sawyer swung by in his pickup. He'd pulled the public incident logs for the past month. 9 calls from Wanda's address, all classified as unfounded. Under state law, that meant potential prosecution for misuse of emergency services and restitution for dispatch costs. "Prosecutor's office is considering charges," he said, handing me the printout. "You might get subpoenaed as witness, just a heads up." I filed it next to Kenyon's letters. A pattern was emerging like boot prints in fresh snow. Sunday night passed without sirens, which almost felt eerie. I poured a glass of apple cider and drafted talking points for the county clerk. Parcel numbers, conservation benefits, references to the state's open space initiative. Grandmother would have approved. She'd spent her 70s organizing tree planting drives and lecturing local kids on watershed health. Sealing the easement felt like finishing her unfinished sentence. Monday, tea day for the easement, dawned bright enough to etch shadows. I drove to the courthouse with Elora riding shotgun, documents clipped and color-tabbed. Halfway through the lobby metal detector, she whispered, "Don't look now, but there's a welcome committee." I glanced sideways. Wanda and Chuck stood near the records counter, each clutching binders the size of phone books. Wanda's smile looked stapled on. Elora leaned into the clerk's window first, slid the easement packet across, and spoke in that calm lawyer cadence. "Recording a conservation easement pursuant to Section 38, 30.5. Boom, timestamp 8:07 a.m. The clerk scanned, nodded, ran the copier. When the ink dried on the reception stamp, the valley's future clicked into permanent gear. Wanda lurched forward, binder flapping. "I need to file a counter easement," she announced. The clerk blinked. "There's no such thing, ma'am. Chuck tried a different route. Can we place a hold, a temporary injunction?" He mispronounced injunction, so it landed halfway between injection and unction. The clerk pointed them to the civil division upstairs, where one would need standing, an attorney, and, inconveniently, a legal basis. Elora and I walked out while they argued over elevator buttons. Outside, sunlight felt lighter. "They'd need a judge, a bond, and a credible claim," Elora said. "They have none. Worst they can do is sue, but you're insulated. Let them spend money." We celebrated with drive-through breakfast burritos and plotted next moves. Step 4 of my grand plan: community goodwill. If the HOA imploded entirely, services like snow plowing and trash pickup could suffer, punishing innocent residents. So I offered to host a valley cleanup and trail mapping day the following Saturday, funded by me, liability waived by the land trust, barbecue included. I emailed invitations before noon. RSVPs trickled back fast. Families, hikers, even a couple of high school scouts needing civic hours. Interesting who was missing from the list. Tuesday at 2:13 a.m., my phone chirped with a trail cam alert. Motion at the lodge's back door. I tapped the feed. 2 figures in hoodies, one hoisting bolt cutters, the other fumbling with a flashlight. They yanked on the padlocked door, found it barred by an interior steel bracket I'd installed, and circled to a window. Glass popped, an alarm strobe ignited inside, bathing them in red menace. They bolted, slipping on wet grass. I dialed the non-emergency sheriff line. My earlier courtesy had paid off. Dispatch recognized the address instantly. Patrol arrived in 8 minutes, intercepted a dented pickup idling near the private gate. Inside, Phil and Chuck, breathless, hands smelling of fresh goo gone from bolt cutter grips. In the truck bed lay a handwritten note. Inventory list for Tool Depot. They'd planned to break in, photograph interior space, maybe stash a mower before dawn, then claim established use. Deputies arrested both for attempted burglary and criminal mischief. Body cam footage captured Phil whining, "But it's community property," while Chuck mouthed the number of his traffic ticket lawyer. I provided cloud-saved video. By sunrise, they'd posted bail, but the mugshots, now public record, shot across neighborhood group chats like fireworks. Wanda held an emergency press release, translation, a shaky iPhone video on the HOA Facebook page. She blamed Phil's sleepwalking and Chuck's emotional distress from playground criticism. Comments section did not hold back. One resident posted the statute on second-degree burglary. Another suggested resignations. Someone else asked if Wanda's next emergency assessment covered bail bonds. I brewed coffee and let natural consequences steep. Wednesday delivered a certified letter from Wanda's newly hired attorney, none other than her cousin's firm. They demanded I retract slanderous allegations and transfer temporary custodianship of the lodge pending neutral arbitration. The letter misquoted the ground lease, misspelled my surname, and threatened to pursue damages exceeding $10 million. Zeros spaced with commas like party balloons. Kenyon's reply, a 2-page masterpiece citing Rule 11 sanctions for frivolous litigation and inviting them to test their theories in court. He CC'd the State Bar's Ethical Committee for good measure. Meanwhile, the newly forming interim HOA board, Viola plus 4 volunteers, met at the library. They voted to freeze all discretionary spending and hire an independent auditor. They also passed a resolution formally apologizing for recent oversteps and pledging cooperation with the land trust. The motion carried unanimously. Note who wasn't present to vote against it. Sawyer texted me a photo later. Wanda's SUV parked at the county courthouse, her steps brisk toward the arraignment wing. Phil and Chuck faced preliminary hearings that afternoon. The prosecutor added a charge of false reporting for each bogus 911 call, stacked like pancakes. Potential penalties, fines, restitution, and up to 6 months in county lockup. A plea deal might swap jail for community service, likely cleaning roadside ditches they once thought beneath them. I confess the image warmed me more than the coffee. Thursday, a thunderstorm rolled in, rattling windows and soaking the valley. I used the indoor day to draft an educational packet for Saturday's cleanup. Trail etiquette, invasive plant ID sheets, and a map showing viewpoints named after local wildlife. Grandmother always said landmarks should honor creatures, not people. Kenyon suggested adding a waiver to keep hikers on trust-approved paths. I inserted it atop page 1. That evening, Elora called. Good news, Recorder's Office finalized the easement index. It's searchable online. Better news, Wanda's cousin just withdrew as counsel, citing conflict of interest. Translation, They smelled smoke and bolted. Without legal representation, Wanda's threats deflated like a week-old balloon arch. But I knew pride seldom surrenders quietly. I triple-checked locks. Friday after lunch, I drove to town for supplies, spare gloves, trash grabbers, extra propane for the grill. At the hardware checkout, a voice behind me muttered, "Valley Dictator." I turned. There stood Marlene, former board secretary, loading planter soil onto the belt. She huffed when our eyes met. "This is all your fault," she snapped. "We could have had the perfect community." I kept my tone level. "I offered cooperation. Your leaders chose threats." She shook her head. "Community means shared sacrifices. You're selfish." She paid cash and left before I could answer. Driving home, I mulled her words. Selfish, concerned chiefly with one's own advantage. Was defending property from a forced land grab selfish? Maybe through her lens, but the valley, its creeks, owls, open sky, wasn't mine for ego. It was stewardship. That distinction they refused to see. Lightning flickered on the horizon as I unloaded the truck. Night settled with cicada song, and for the first time in days, my lodge cameras stayed calm. Saturday dawned crisp as a fresh apple. By 9, SUVs lined the meadow parking area. I handed out maps and gloves. Kids chased each other with biodegradable trash bags. Parents formed work teams. Viola organized a flowerbed rehab near the gazebo, symbolic cleansing of HOA mischief. Sawyer and 2 fire department buddies felled a dead ash threatening the walking path. Elora set up an info booth explaining the conservation easement and future volunteer programs. At noon, I fired up the grill. Burgers sizzled, veggie patties smoked. Someone turned up bluegrass on a portable speaker. Laughter floated against the ridgeline. Looking around, I realized the community had shifted in less than a week, from simmering division to cautious collaboration. And Wanda? Absent. Halfway through lunch, a deputy cruiser eased up the driveway. Not lights, just presence. Out stepped Deputy Carter, the same who'd first responded to the tool shed delusion. He sampled a burger, declared it criminally good, and pulled me aside. "Wanda and Phil accepted a plea," he said. 20 weekends of community service, $3 grand in fines each, plus restitution for dispatch hours. Chuck, meanwhile, hired a public defender and planned to fight the burglary charge, but evidence was solid. "Oh, and the prosecutor's office wants your footage secure. You might testify." I nodded, unsurprised. Carter added, "False 911 calls show up on background checks. Employers don't like that. Just saying." I thanked him, feeling neither triumph nor pity, only closure inching closer. The event wound down around 3. Volunteers left with muddy boots and full bellies. Kids waved maps of their favorite new lookouts. Before packing up, Viola approached with a cardboard box. Inside lay a manila folder containing the audited financial report, early draft. "Looks ugly," she said. "Playground fund nearly drained. Consulting payments flagged as questionable. And, biggest bombshell, evidence of duplicate invoices routed through an address linked to Marlene's nephew. Potential wire fraud. They plan to present findings at the next general meeting with county investigators invited. "I'm retiring from board life after that," Viola confessed. "But I'll make sure we reset the compass before I go." Sun dipped as I stowed chairs. The valley felt lighter again. Sunday evening, one final earthquake. My inbox pinged with an email from Marlene. Subject line, "Settlement proposal." She offered to mediate a compromise whereby I'd lease the lodge to the HOA for $1 a year, they'd drop all pending complaints, and we'd move forward harmoniously. She attached a draft contract littered with typos and an indemnity clause that attempted to shift all liability onto me. I counted to 10, then 20. Composure matters. I replied with a single sentence. "The matter is closed. Please direct future correspondence to my attorney. CC to Kenyon. BCC to Elora and Viola for transparency." Moments later, a new message popped up, anonymous Gmail, likely Marlene again. "You'll regret this." It arrived at 9:13 p.m. I forwarded it to Sawyer. Harassment is still harassment. I slept soundly. Monday morning, rain cleared. I brewed coffee on the lodge porch, Jasper grazing nearby. The valley stretched green and untroubled. My phone buzzed with a headline notification. Local HOA president and treasurer charged with embezzlement. The article detailed the auditor's findings, the county's swift action, and quotes from residents expressing betrayal. Not my doing, just truth blossoming. An hour later, Kenyon called laughing. "They want to settle," he said. "Full release of claims, public apology, repayment of all legal fees." I agreed. On one condition, the apology must include acknowledgement of misuse of emergency services and harassment, posted on the HOA bulletin board and online page for 30 consecutive days. Kenyon relayed the term. By afternoon, they accepted. The apology letter went live Friday. It read in part, "We recognize that our actions violated the property rights of the Valley landowner and caused undue stress to residents and county services. We apologize for false statements and will refrain from further interference." Signed by Wanda, Phil, Marlene, and Chuck, though Chuck's signature looked more like grim scribble. Residents screenshot it, commented "about time," and moved on with their day. A week later, dumpster trucks hauled away Wanda's ornamental topiary from the HOA entrance, sold to cover restitution. Phil listed the golf cart on an online marketplace. Chuck resigned, citing personal growth. Marlene was last seen peeling faded Integrity First stickers from her minivan. Karma didn't need my steering. It found its own lane. Today, writing this on a weathered picnic table outside the lodge, I watch neighbors hike the new Ridge Loop Trail, pausing at the overlook grandmother once called Falcon's Rest. The Land Trust installed a wooden plaque describing the valley's history, its first stewards, the diverse ecology, the promise of preservation. My name appears only in tiny print as current caretaker, which feels right. The guest lodge remains a guest lodge. Nieces will visit next month. A veterans writing workshop booked a fall weekend. The only tools inside are spare fishing rods and a well-oiled chainsaw for storms. As for Wanda, community service has her picking litter along the highway every Saturday. Orange vest, grabber stick, and plenty of time to rethink eminent versus imminent. I sip coffee. Jasper snorts at dragonflies and the valley breathes free. No tool depot required. I realized tranquility had an expiration date when a county envelope announced a public utility corridor proposed. The neon orange line on the map slashed through my conservation easement, jumped the trout stream, and ended at the cul-de-sac where the homeowners association leases land from me. The whole mess began months earlier when Wanda tried to requisition my guest lodge as a community tool shed, even dialing 911 to demand deputies enforce her fantasy. That fiasco earned her a trespass warning and should have taught her boundaries, but it only redirected her ambition toward utilities. My grandmother's will made me steward of every acre, orchard, ridgeline, and stream, so caving was never an option. I was raised on her rule: never confuse being neighborly with being a doormat. Small people with titles forget deeds are records. I phoned Viola, the acting president, and emailed her a scan. 10 minutes later, she sent back forged meeting minutes stamped with Wanda's name as interim infrastructure chair. Deputy Carter confirmed Wanda forged every signature. Blue Star's salesman Tyson, already counting commissions, was told to stand down or star in a felony case. Wanda escalated, calling 911, her 10th false alarm, claiming my empty guest lodge was a wildfire hazard. The inspector praised my brush lines and handed her another citation. She didn't want safety. She wanted leverage. Tyson tried charm, waving graphs about property values. I handed him the recorded easement. Utilities must prove overriding public necessity, not craving faster streaming. He left grumbling. At an emergency HOA meeting, Wanda pitched herself as savior of digital progress. I countered with trail cam photos of her and Tyson trespassing, spray painting survey marks the day the vote was forged. Gasps bounced off cinder block walls. The membership rejected the Corridor 19-1. Tyson fled. Wanda glowered. She wasn't finished. 3 nights later, a heavy storm hit. Creek gauges spiked, so I rode the ATV and found a freshly shoveled berm blocking the stream, redirecting water toward the HOA playground. Trail cams showed Wanda and an accomplice giggling in ankle-deep mud, manufacturing a flood to justify their road. Backfire, runoff undermined the hill and collapsed half the slide by dawn. Sawyer, the fire marshal captain, arrived with environmental officers. Damaging a protected trout stream invites state and federal charges. Wanda tried blaming natural causes until an officer matched her boot prints to the mud. The prosecutor added felony environmental damage. Tyson and Blue Star were roped in. Emails on Wanda's laptop revealed she'd promised them an easement fast track if they funneled a community grant into a secret account she controlled. The HOA's insurer refused coverage. Wanda spent 4 nights in county before her brother posted bail. Tyson lawyered up. The plea deal stacked high. Wanda got 18 months in county detention and $60,000 restitution for restoring the stream and playground. Tyson's firm paid a $150,000 civil penalty and lost its county license for a year. Tyson pled to a misdemeanor, agreeing to testify if needed. Restitution funded crews who removed the berm, stabilized banks, and planted willows. Kenyon, my attorney, wrote an agreement making the HOA responsible for future upkeep. No one objected. Wanda's schemes had bankrupted their patients. By Thanksgiving, volunteers rebuilt the playground with donated lumber and, ironically, leftover drainage pipe from Wanda's earlier toolshed fantasy. Kids named the new slide Justice Falls. In December, I strung lights on the guest lodge and hosted a cookie swap. No speeches, just cider and jokes about fiber optic bracelets in county jail. Viola announced she'd run for a full term on a platform of transparency and, boldly, 0 special assessments for 2 years. Residents applauded like she'd promised free puppies. Meanwhile, the parole board assigned Wanda to weekend crews planting willows along the very stream she'd scarred. Sawyer texted a photo. Orange jumpsuit, shovel, ankle deep in snowmelt. Symmetry feels good. Blue Star's road dream died. Another carrier later hung aerial fiber on existing poles. No trench, no easement. Delivering gig speeds without drowning trout. A regional magazine profiled the valley, titling it "One Family's Stand for Land." I insisted the spotlight stay on volunteers, not me. Spring returned. The orchard graphs I set last September are leafing. Trout spawn where the berm once blocked. Kids' bike trails traced along old survey lines. Under Viola's calm leadership, the HOA now worries about snowplows and the chili cook-off. Their new signs read, "Community through cooperation, not compulsion." Wanda's old placards went to recycling, though Sawyer kept one for the firehouse dartboard. Sometimes I reread Kenyon's first cease and desist and marvel how a single word, no, blossomed into accountability. Evenings, Jasper the horse and I walk the restored stream, hearing only water and the faint echo of that entitled order. "We need your second house for our tools." Funny how stewardship and backbone can keep an entire valley safe from a bully with forms and a phone. Friends, thank you. See you soon.